My name is Chris Yolanda. Thank you for taking the time to join me here today. I'm here with Holly Paige, and she is author and project manager of Food for Consciousness. So, Holly, how you doing?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is the biggest question. How are we all
How
doing?
is humanity doing? That is that you've just hit it on the head. How is humanity doing?
I think humanity is in a very it's in a very confused place. I don't think it quite knows what it's doing or where it's going.
It's
Perhaps that's
split.
intentional.
It's split. So it's never a simple. It's not really a simple answer, is it? Split.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess that our lives are in so many different directions. We have to focus on. Do we work so hard that we have to pay the bills to just to keep the roof over our head, or
Yeah.
can we live off the grid? Can we do all this kind of crazy stuff and not have that worry? But then again, you're thinking about your family, your children, and what they've got coming in, and what's going on in their lives. You realise that we're so spread out that we never have much focus on ourselves anymore.
Yeah, or perhaps, yeah, so we're straight into it, aren't we? We've gone straight in. And I say
Perhaps we
focus on
have.
ourselves. And I don't know about that. I think sometimes the problem is we've got too much focus on ourselves. And, and that's why I'm going to sort of be a bit of a, sort of, how shall I put it, sort of stir things up a bit and say,
Good.
well, actually, self-obsession of self-absorption is a problem of our time. And it's like there is something about being focused outward, but the confusion is because what's going on around us so much of the time is so crazy that the answer then seems to be to focus inward. But I would say it's focusing on the mind of nature. It's focusing our minds on the mind of nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
and
guess
engaging in a larger mind.
Well, it's like a collective consciousness kind of thing.
I probably wouldn't put it that way because that can imply. It sounds like a collection of human consciousnesses, doesn't it? Is that what does collective consciousness mean?
That's a very good question. Collective consciousness, I would figure, would mean people working collectively as I guess a community would be one way of putting it.
But I would say that unless it's connected to the mind of nature, it's bound to be disharmonious and ultimately fail. And we see this again and again. And this is the problem, because even if you've got a community in nature, unless the human minds are connected to the minds of nature, it's how can I put it? It's not working towards sustainable goals.
So, what kind of I was going to say? So, just literally right on that point. So, sustainable goals. I mean, are we talking about resources of the planet? There, are we talking about our own resources, our personal possessions, as it were? And what did you mean by that?
Connected to our true purpose.
Okay.
And
on that, do you think we've all got a purpose then?
Yeah, I think we've got individual purposes, but we've also our true purpose is aligned to a greater purpose.
Okay.
And then we get into a territory it's quite difficult to choose what words to use because people use different words for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I would figure.
But part of the where we play our part in the web of life. So we have an individual life and an individual role, individual purposes, but very much enmeshed in the greater scheme of things. And yeah, how can you put it? The web of life, connected to the life force, connected to source, aligned to the earth. There's so many ways to describe this. I mean, I can almost see it and feel it, but sometimes it feels so real for me that I don't always. I underestimate the necessity of spelling it out.
Yeah.
But I think that's the problem for humans, that they're lost because they're lost in their own selves, and that's a really unhappy, lonely place to be. And to be forever trying to make ourselves bigger is an exhausting thing to be doing. Make ourselves bigger and more important, rather than to lose ourselves in something that is bigger than us. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective actually. Kind of, while it's okay to be, I guess, introspective on oneself, and what effect are you having on the greater world and the life. I think it's getting quite dark where you are. I can see the light fading.
Dark. Do you want me to have a light on so you
can it'd be lovely.
See me on the video?
Yeah.
Is that a bit better?
It's much better. Yeah, I just was noticing you from the moment when we first began talking. The light was just getting darker and darker and darker.
Yeah. So, I haven't pre-planned what I'm going to say,
Me
so we're
neither.
just going with the conversation. But, we're talking about intention and purpose. And I would say, the number one goal is to find our true purpose. And if we don't know our true purpose, then our purpose is to find our purpose. And we find that by connection to
That's an
the
interesting
mind
way
of
of putting it.
nature.
If you don't have a purpose, then your purpose literally is to find your purpose. I really
I
like that.
think that has to be the starting point. And the thing is about having a purpose is, you see, you can't have freedom without a purpose. This is a mistake people make, because if you're having freedom from things, that isn't freedom. It's just like the old thing about don't think about an elephant. All you can think about is an elephant. The only way you can be free is to be free to do something.
Yeah, I get that. So it's you're
You
free
can't
to
be
do.
free from anything because you're still in it.
Of course, yeah.
So it's logical, it makes sense. It's obvious when you think about it. So then, what are you free for? And it's you're free for your true purpose, which is aligned to your true desires. Now it's very difficult for us in these current times, because our sense of what our desires is continually manipulated, and it's been going on for a while. So we're confused about what our true desires are.
And do you think so then, like, just confused about our desires and our wants because we've got a lot of distractions now? I think.
Yeah.
So where you're going
And
with
then
that? I mean,
they're deliberately manipulated as well. But also, we are to a level disconnected from our feelings. And there's sort of reasons for this that go way back. And this is the thing. I think this is what makes what I talk about a bit different to what the other stuff you'll hear around in terms of nutrition or, politics and all this kind of stuff. Because I'm basing this on a very basic understanding of what has happened to the human sense of self related to what's happened to the human brain. And there is plenty of research that backs this up. There's plenty of data that backs this up. The only thing that isn't really talked about is how all the different data, how it joins to make the bigger picture, and basically what's happened to the human brain since we left our original habitat in the forest, because that's where we were, because the whole globe was covered in forest.
Yeah, so if we say, obviously, I live in Nottingham, so I can appreciate the fact that our forests have disappeared because Sherwood Forest is now literally just a shell of its former self. So I can take that straight on board.
Yeah,
what I see.
The forest, as you know, I actually grew up in Sherwood in
Nottingham.
Really?
Oh, you did? Yeah, I can remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, in Sherwood, and I didn't realise till long after I left that actually that was the southern reaches of Sherwood Forest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really was Sherwood Forest, but we knew, it's just a suburb. It was just housing and factories and shops. But the thing is, our indigenous habitat as humans is warm forest, where and that stands to reason, where our shelter was provided, and we didn't, everything was provided for us. We learnt to live in different kinds of climates since we left that kind of environment. But there's very little dispute that our original home was tropical forest.
Okay, so humans, we're quite inventive. We're quite a lot of ingenuity in there. So we've learned to adapt to our changing environment. So even on the cycle of the wheel of the year, you obviously go through the different weather cycles from an abundant summer through autumn with everything dying off, and then winter where everything's bare and naked. Again, spring where it all is rebirthed again. So it's no wonder why our ancestors, saw that as their base tradition really isn't to follow the wheel of the year. So
yeah, although that might be a comparatively recent thing, and it's highly likely that humans started out in non-seasonal tropical forest where we actually didn't have those seasons.
So it was kind of like a year-long experience of the same weather?
We could maintain our ideal diet and lifestyle throughout the year,
Because I guess if you look at... I don't know where you would particularly choose to base that... so on a worldwide basis, then where would be the perfect place for us to be? I mean, at one point in history, then would we say that was like the tropics of so what was the Sahara, which was an abundant forest?
Non-seasonal forest, non-seasonal tropical forest, and of course climates changed a lot at various times.
Of course, yeah.
And it's difficult to know exactly, where that non-seasonal tropical forest existed at any particular point in time, but it does still exist today, and it has always existed. I'm just going to turn my phone off. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that.
That's all right.
So it doesn't interrupt at any point. Sorry.
Don't worry, it's fine. Don't apologise, it's fine.
Just put it on airplane mode, can't I? Be okay. Yeah. The point is, though, I mean, we could argue forever, you know, exactly where humans lived and what was the state of the forests at various points. But the point is that, like any other species, we do have an ideal diet. I mean, it doesn't mean it's all, you know, laid out what time we must eat exactly what, but we do have an ideal range of foods that nourishes us and gives us certain nutrients. And there's not really any other species that could deviate from their natural diet the way humans have done, and even survive and reproduce.
That is an incredible feat when you think about it, because
it is incredible. Yeah,
it is the range of human foods. Like to go into a supermarket, for instance, you see the breadth of stock that's available for a person to have and to consume in various forms. And when you look at like the natural diet, you know, we're talking about nuts, berries, you know, fruits of the forest.
Exactly.
And grasses, and then
a lot more than, you know, because in a forest environment, it's not like picking off supermarket shelves. There's all kinds of nutrients in there that we wouldn't even think of. You know, for example, you're picking fruit in nature, there's going to be a lot of insect material in there, and you're going to have various bits of things from the soil and various deposits of, you know, so insect eggs and goodness knows what. And sorry, I lost the train of thought for a moment. Yeah, but also because, you know, before the human decline, our digestive systems worked much more efficiently. So we'd be able to digest all the seeds in these fruits and break them down. You know, and nowadays, you know, this is why blending is so great, you know, because you can start to replicate the same kind of process. But we had an immensely varied diet. There's an anthropologist called Catherine Milton who's looked at what primates eat in the wild. That's the species who are most similar to us.
Yeah.
And concluded that, you know, they are getting 50 times the amount of micronutrients as a human and civilization.
Than say we are. So what does their diet primarily consist of? Do you know at all?
Well, I suppose it varies from species, but, you know, obviously there's fruits and various leaves and vegetation and herbs and insects and possibly eggs and, you know, and obviously the seeds that come with the fruits.
Of course.
That's the kind of thing. You know, I'm talking very broadly speaking.
Yeah, of course.
You know, when I talk about ideal human diet, I break it down and say, well, fruit is our number one food. But there's lots of reasons why we can't eat a predominantly fruit-based diet today, or most people can't, because there's a quality of the fruit. The fact if it's imported, it's not ripened, because it ripens. It needs to be tree ripened to have all the minerals. It's going to be lacking in minerals. It's not going to contain everything that would have come with it in the forest.
No, I guess what I see in my head there is that if I go to the supermarket now and I go to the produce, the fruit and vegetable section, you can see all the bananas they have on sale are green, and that they're strictly speaking, they're not actually ready to eat. They you take them home and then they should kind of be in the cupboard for a bit.
But they're not going to have all the minerals, because
exactly, they're not going to have all the minerals.
You know, there's in my book, Food for Consciousness, I basically break it all down, you know, and just back to, you know, just think about this mechanically, because humans are such an ego trip, which is actually a symptom of what we've done to ourselves. It's the ego is just something that's become disconnected from our true needs and from reality and everything around us, and it has this kind of delusion that it's above it all, and it you know, doesn't have to sustain itself in the way that other species do, or even a machine would. We think we're even, you know, we just think we're way above it all, and it's a fantasy. And ironically, by not nourishing ourselves properly, we're damaging our neural systems further and making ourselves even more disconnected from reality.
So yeah, that kind of brings me to a point really. So the first time I met you, that is kind of how you described the world symptom. Because I met you because you were giving a talk at AV7 hosted by Ian O'Crane, and that was May 2016. And I can remember that conversation that you had, and then we spoke about it a little bit after. Neuroactive foods, like foods that could restore the neurological pathways of the brain, as opposed to the degenerate ones that a a lot of the foods that we
Yeah.
have. It's kind of, I think you called it Frankenstein foods. How things now are just they have so much stuff in them, they're no longer closer to their natural
No,
version.
but we've been, we've been a long way from it for a long time. This is a thing to remember. You see, for example, foods like grains are not, and pulses are not natural human foods. I'm not saying you should never eat them, especially if they're prepared a certain way and eaten in small quantities. I'm not saying that, but I'm just still saying they're not natural human foods.
Okay.
So you see, if you think about it, if we're willing to actually think about ourselves mechanically, although of course we're more than a machine, but still it does bear to think about, what elements we need, what compounds we need in order to keep this whole thing functioning. So, we need a whole spectrum of minerals, and a lot of them are lost from the soil for a lot of reasons: deforestation and over farming and all these things, and the fact all our waste is being shipped out to sea, all this kind of stuff. So, but we also need to build our neural system is built very largely of fats, yeah. And if you think about it, when you heat fats, you're changing the chemical structure. So we need raw fat. We need fats that are undamaged by heat. And it is so far from where we've been in our thinking for so long now. It's almost too much outside of the. It's too much outside the box for people to actually look at. It's just too weird. But it's cooking is a survival mechanism. It's a survival method. It's when we left, for whatever reason, our ideal habitat, we discovered that we could prepare foods that weren't ideal for us by heating them, or later by fermenting them to make them edible, so they're not too toxic for us.
But
and this has gone on so long, it's become normal in our thinking.
So I guess we've evolutionarily gone along with those changes, and therefore we've had to keep those foods with us.
Well, I don't think our bodies are massively adapted to them, but if you're living in somewhere that's a long way from, nowadays the situation has changed because we can start to ship foods around the world, even though they don't arrive in ideal condition. We can eat tropical fruits from other countries. We can ship, various seeds around the world as various superfoods. But humans survived, before this was possible by only eating local foods. And that's good in a way, but often these weren't ideal foods, but they learnt to prepare them in such a way, or piggybacking off other species who were in their ideal habitat, by using, I'm not saying it's wrong to do this, I'm just observing what's happened. Using grazing animals who are out all day, graze and are able to convert all the vegetable matter and herbs and insects into milk that then we could use for nutrition, or kill them for meat, And this has been, so we've been on a survival trip for a long while as a species.
When you talk about the milk thing, I guess for some people that's still quite an alien concept. The fact that we're actually using the milk made for the calf of a completely different animal for ourselves, and
but it's been a very necessary survival strategy.
It has,
you think about, for example, say Britain, right? Between September and March, even if you go sunbathing naked, you can't make vitamin D from the sun, because even if the sun shines, it's not high enough in the sky to shine UVB rays onto the skin that we need to make vitamin D. So you've got to get vitamin D from somewhere. And that's going to be, traditionally that would be an animal source. For example, one way people got it was by handling sheep or making wool or something, using wool to make fabric, and the lanolin in the wool provide vitamin D. That's one example.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting.
Or drinking milk or eating eggs. So these have been our survival strategies. So they're not ideal, but they've been how we've got along. But the point is that if we're not eating our ideal diet, it's going to have an impact on our neural system and the whole rest of us. So, for example, we need undamaged fats to build the neural system. We need undamaged amino acids to build our neurotransmitters, because our neurotransmitters are made from amino acids mainly.
Okay.
So amino acids being the building blocks of peptides and proteins. So we need to take in at least a proportion of them unheat treated in order to get them in ideal form.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah, I can
does this make sense?
It does make sense to me, actually. Yeah. So
And then,
I was going to say, so on a typical basis, is this kind of how you live with your general food diet? I mean, what is it,
yeah,
do you try to
yeah.
keep to those natural foods in a kind of
As
way as
much as
possible?
possible, yeah. It's not 100%, but as much as possible. And it's interesting. We just, before we did this interview, talking about, at the weekend, my daughter had a party, and I actually did deviate quite massively, which I
Did you
wouldn't
have some
normally
cake?
do. Yeah, and I really felt it. My even after one day, I couldn't use my brain the way I'd normally be able to use it.
It's very intriguing when you say what we eat kind of changes our behavior over the next day or a couple of days or so,
Yeah,
because
we
of
all know
how it
that.
changes.
Yeah, we
Like,
know that. I mean, this is all documented. It's no secret that now that food and nutrition affects our brain. I think the only thing I'm saying that's different is I'm taking it to a deeper level, and I'm saying that foods we thought of as healthy, they may be healthier than other options, but it's not, I want to get really to looking at what is the ideal food for our species and to rebuild our neural systems. But there's even more depth to it than this. So I've talked about, to recap, I've talked about essential fats in undamaged form to build the neural system, undamaged amino acids to provide neurotransmitters. And then there's the compounds in fruit and vegetables, like the flavonoids, that we need to boost our neurochemistry. But, going deeper than that, the change from eating one kind of diet in the forest, in the non-seasonal tropical forest, to gradually a different type of diet this is what's caused the problem at a fundamental level to human sanity, is that it's not just the way that the body and brain are built, it actually changes the way that the DNA is read. Because we've got DNA, but the way we're built isn't just dependent on the DNA, it's dependent on the way it's read to build it. Does that make sense?
yeah, okay. I think I've got an idea where you're coming from with that. So
It's a
how?
code.
Yeah,
DNA is a code, but it's read differently depending on the biochemistry of the body. That's what epigenetics is
yes, it's the
about.
epigenetics. That's right. Is that a field that
That's
you've?
what epigenetics is.
Okay. Is that a big field that you've obviously been part of for quite a long time? And what kind of led you to this what epiphany? What was did you come into it
No,
quite quickly?
well,
Was
the
there a
thing,
period of time?
oh, interesting. I mean, I suppose as a child, I went through, I sort of realised that there was something more. There was something more. I just knew there was something more than everyday consciousness, although I wouldn't have used those words. And I wanted to find out. And I also observed that there was something wrong with humans. I actually made that observation. There's something really wrong with people. I'm going to find out what it is. And I was convinced it was something to do with the brain. That was just something came to me as a young child. But then, what really got me going adulthood was, it's just purely a search for that feeling of rightness.
When you say
I
right,
wanted to
does
know
that also include morals as well? Or is
No,
that
not
no?
really. No,
No?
just feeling right. And I would say originally I couched it in terms of feeling happy. But recently I've come to feel that's not broad enough a description of it, because it's natural for humans to feel a range of emotions and responses to things,
Yes.
Yeah, and to be happy with things, or sad, or angry, or pleased, or all sorts of things.
No, you
That's
said
not the point. It's like the point is the feeling of connection. And when you've got that feeling of connection, even though you might experience these ranges of responses to things, you've always got something else that's
okay.
kind of bigger and better that's holding you through it all.
Well, would you? I mean, you haven't explicitly said the word, but are we talking about a greater consciousness, a being that we should, a feeling or a connection out there?
Um,
Is that an
for
external
me, I would
entity, shall we
describe it.
say?
I would describe it as, and closest to us as animals on this planet, the closest big consciousness we have is that of the Earth. But obviously there's something much bigger beyond that.
Yeah, I think a universal overall, like how it
Yeah.
all comes together. I mean, I guess a lot of people have some ideas what the universe, what the Earth is. I mean,
Yeah, and I'm very hesitant to get into that field. I mean, I do have some working beliefs,
okay,
but I'm hesitant to get into that because I feel my job isn't to speculate on that. My job is to show people a way of nourishing themselves and living naturally and organizing their minds and starting to use their minds the way that they are intended to be used to find connection to the earth and their sense of purpose. And that's my job. And what people experience when they start to do things, it's not my business to tell them.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I do hear a lot of stories about people who, well, they'll go into like the wilds, particularly in America. There's quite a few bow hunters who literally will just, they'll pack up their gear and literally they'll live on the land for like 2 or 3 months and a go, and they all come back and they're energized in a different way. They have such a vibrant energy about themselves, and how they've drank natural water, they also eaten natural foods, they've obviously hunted and done what they need to do to survive, but actually to feel more human, if anything. And
exactly. Which reminds me, I'm just going to move myself to sit on my earthing sheet. I forgot to do that when I was tidying up.
So what's an earthing sheet?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a sort of a survival mechanism for living indoors. So, if we were, obviously for most of our time on the planet, we were born, conceived, lived, died in electrical connection with the planet.
Okay.
Yeah, and the planet is, as we describe it, negatively charged, i.e., it's electron rich.
Okay.
If you're connected electrically to the planet, you've got a constant source of electricity coming into you.
And this is what your seat is. You say it's an earthing sheet.
So it's like, obviously, ideally, it'd be nice to do that, but I'm here in Devon now, and it's cold and rainy outside, and I'm on a computer, so I'm not doing that, am I? But
no.
A survival method. I use when I'm working, I usually sit on an earthing plush pad, which is the same principle as an earthing sheet, but it's a cloth sheet with silver wires going through it, and it connects. You connect through a plug into the earthing connection of the house.
Wow, I didn't even know such things existed.
And then I would so recommend it. You love it. You'll see the difference, and it connects you. I mean, in Britain, we're fortunate that most houses are very well earthed.
They are, yeah, very much so, yeah.
So you can connect right through into the earth, but in some other places, you might choose to use a grounding rod instead. So you'd stick it outside into the ground outside.
Wow, it never even occurred to me you do such a thing.
So much difference, and the health benefits, because you see, the thing is, people are astonished at all these chronic conditions that can just magically clear up when you do this. But if you think we're designed to be connected electrically in a certain way.
What's that? Walking like barefoot on the grass, for instance. We have a connection to the earth.
If you have a computer and you never bother to charge it up, and it started playing up, you would realise you needed to plug it in sometimes.
Absolutely.
And the same is actually you get an electrical current when you're connected to the earth, and it's not just grounding; it's actually charging you, and we're meant to be charging that way. And I'll add to this, you think it's no dispute that our brains are electrical. If we're designed to run an electrical connection to the earth and we stop doing that, that is going to change our thoughts.
Wow.
It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, is that obvious or not?
It does seem obvious. It really does seem. You take the most simple route from A to B and you get the right answer. So if say people were to try and get one of these earthing sheets, where would I even go to look for one?
We have them on foodforconsciousness.co.uk.
Okay.
But there are plenty of other sources. And, if anyone wants to ask me, they feel free to email me.
Yeah,
I mean, we do supply earthing sheets, mouse mats, and plush pads.
Okay, so let's talk about
I would say be careful to go for cheap ones that you can get online, because some of them aren't properly made.
Okay, so let's talk about your website.
If you don't want to get them off us, I can still advise you where to get them.
Absolutely fantastic. So with your website then, Food for Consciousness, then, so let's have a quick look at that, because I do have it up in the background here. So, what kind of things do you have for? So what is your website about? I mean, it appears to be lots of different things in one place. I see you have many items for sale, and you've also a lot about your book and your ethos.
If I was going to sell one thing off the site, I'd sell my book. I mean, we sell a selection of foods that are in alignment with what we think are, good things to eat. We sell earthing products. We sell the so-called Geo Cleanse, the orgone effects products, and they are, I would say everybody should have. Geo Cleanse is a simple device that you stick in a socket. It's a lifetime purchase. You buy it once, and what it does is it changes the electricity in the premises. It works through the wiring of your premises or house.
Okay.
And it changes, like in nature, you have negative ions,
Right.
so-called electrons. It's electron-rich in nature
Okay.
because the Earth is electrical. But in artificial environments, generally they're positively charged, so-called. That's just, I mean, this is just a convention of naming.
Okay.
They're positively charged. They're depleted in electrons, and this is the cause of a lot of problems and unhappiness in indoor spaces. So this has been known about for a long, 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 long while. But the Geo Cleanse, it changes the environment of the house so that it's full of negative ions, and it also harmonizes signals coming in like Wi-Fi, mobile mouse, smart meters,
Okay.
geopathic stress, and also emotional imprints from people who've previously been in the house.
Right. So I've got the Geo Cleanse up on the page so everyone can see online what it is.
And that is the most powerful of that range. In a way, I'm not really passionate about selling products, but I have these products.
Well, I think there's a big difference about just selling things for the sake of selling them, and actually selling things for the purpose that actually has an intent behind it. That actually this thing
Exactly.
actually
I
be
think
really good.
It's the intent, because although I would love us all to be able to live without these things, right now it's not going to happen tomorrow for a lot of us. And while we're in these environments, we should protect ourselves. And the Geo Cleanse, I mean, how I found out about it is I actually walked into somebody's house, and I was like, because I'm very sensitive to electricity and atmosphere, and I said, what's happening here? Because it felt like being in nature.
Wow. So I was going to say, how did you come across that in the first place?
Yeah, I just knew there was something happening, and what is this? And I was told what it was.
So how does it change? Like, because it says here by its description that it's organ resonance. Is that how you pronounce it? So that changes the energy
the
around
guy
you.
who invented them, he's called Gerard Beanie. I'll send you a link after this
Please
interview,
do, thank you.
to my interview with him. He's a genius. He's not going to reveal everything about how he makes them because it's a patent pending.
Fair enough,
He's not revealing everything, not because he's devious, but because he's protecting himself. And, I have had so many, how it's difficult to get feedback from people, isn't it? People are busy. But I've had so many positive reviews of these devices. I have no doubt in my mind they work, and they've changed my life, because I was the kind of person who every time I was indoors, I wanted to run out the house. And, I've got people who can tell you about this. It's quite crazy. I just want to run, because I didn't want to sleep indoors because I couldn't stand the electrical environment.
Because the one thing that I hate to use the word skeptical. The one thing I guess I haven't quite programmed separately is because Wi-Fi as a signal and telephone signals and mobile phone frequencies are everywhere generally. Is it going to shut them off when you're in a certain area? Is that?
No, it's not. You can't. It's not a good idea to shut them off. It doesn't. What you need is this harmonizes them. Now, I'm not saying this is as good as not having any of this happening. It's an emergency measure, and we need it. We've got 5G on the way too.
Yeah, that's on a big rollout.
You need this kind of protection, but this is only an emergency measure. This isn't to say, we can just carry on like this. And there's no need to carry on like this. And the point I'd make, why do we need all these communication signals? We need them because the brain has been damaged, right? So we need them in order to get ourselves sorted out again. But long term, there's a much better plan, and that's to regain our natural abilities.
Okay.
We don't need phones. We don't need the internet. Not long term, but we do now.
But I guess in terms of our communication, like you might have like family or friends who live like in another country or who live just across the city, who you generally perhaps wouldn't see on a regular basis, and it's ideal to have communication with them. So a phone is useful for that, and obviously
we do now. I mean, longer term. I mean, we're so telepathic naturally, we wouldn't need any of this stuff. But that's not coming tomorrow.
No.
So meanwhile, we need these communication systems, and we need to protect ourselves. And I don't have a problem with understanding that we're on a journey here.
What isn't it incredible with how? Let's just take the term you use there, telepathic. So, for instance, with the technological advances that are happening, say within 5 to 10 years now, we're going to be having phones that are embedded within us. So I would say, like perhaps in our wrist or on a smartphone that's perhaps connected to us organically, that we could then just dial, and obviously we have perhaps a screen in our eye where we can then just have a video conversation over the new equivalent of Skype at that time will be that we can have in anywhere we go. Is that not telepathy in its perhaps a technological form?
That's not my dream. I mean, if some people want to do that, it's not my business, and I haven't got the capability to stop it. But it's like, that's not my dream. I'd rather have my natural capabilities back.
No, what I meant was is that like, because telepathy, say, again, putting the skeptic hat slightly on, is not an ability most of us have naturally, shall we say? Um, is that is it technology? Is that not technology actually giving us that ability?
We're
Anyway,
using technology to compensate for what we've lost. And,
okay,
anyone's free to disagree with me about this,
no,
but,
absolutely,
you're asking me
absolutely
what
fine.
I think. We're using technology to compensate for what we've lost. And, we naturally know, we innately know we're meant to be able to communicate with each other, rapidly and with lots of people and exchange. We know that, we can feel it. So we're hungry for it. We were hungry for the internet. I was hungry for the internet. We know we should be able to just tap into sources of knowledge and communicate with each other. Trouble is, with all these things that we've got going on, they leave us empty because it's something we want, but it's not quite what we want. And it's well understood now the problems that the internet and social media are causing people.
Yeah, I mean, social media as such. I mean, I guess I use it every day. It is
Yeah, me too.
it's a source of great frustration for some people.
It's something we need and something we want, but it's still not quite what we really need and want. So we're we're
I think
still
we're
with that feeling
nowadays
lacking.
we are so bombarded with lots of different types of information, as that now
Mm.
you can see your thoughts and their thoughts, their actions, where they are, what they're doing, of everybody we know and everybody who we
So
aspire to talk
it's
to.
chaotic, right? So
Yeah,
if you're connected into the mind of nature, it's different because you're receiving the information you need at the time you need it. It's already pre-organized for you, and it's just it's the nature of life that everything comes in this patterning. It's fractal, really. It's all based on the Fibonacci series, but which is an ideal format for communication and growth. You see, it's not chaotic. It's massive. It's overwhelming, but it's not chaotic, and it's giving you what you need when you need it.
okay, I can see
And we
where.
potentially got all access. You see, that's the difference I notice. It's like, I mean, I've been rebuilding myself, my neurosis for a long while, and I know that everything I experience is just mere glimpses of what is possible. It's just tiny glimpses, but I've seen enough to know that when I live and nourish myself in a certain way, I start, and using certain herbs that help the neural system and so forth, and certain practices, you start to tune into that, and it's amazing. And it's calm, it's not frenetic, it's overwhelming in a different way. It's overwhelming in a pleasurable way, rather than like tons of little information what I'm supposed to do with it. It's telling you what you need to know. It's been held by a bigger intelligence than your own. And
So,
that was, humans lived like that for a long while.
so then is it then possible for someone who literally has, who's, shall we say, position zero? They've never learned any of this before, and they want to go, okay, I want to kind of reset myself, or
Yeah,
how can I go back to a more natural
yeah.
state of mind? How can I go about doing so? Like, how do I go on this mental reactivation, this connection to nature journey? How do I start that? I mean, what would be
How
your
would you start?
recommendations to someone?
Well, I was there's three strands and they weave together. And one is the nutrition and physical lifestyle. The other is the way you organize your mind, and the other is your connection to the earth and the larger forces of nature. And that's to do with finding your purpose and true desires. And it's not instantaneous. It's a path, but it's a very enjoyable path. And to me, it's the only path that makes any sense because it's going somewhere.
Okay, that's an interesting way of putting it. So,
Mm.
like this.
So this is my book. This is what my book, Food for Consciousness, is about. I mean, I'm going to write more books, smaller books,
Okay,
and I'm
like kind
planning.
of
I've
pocket
got three
sized.
more books. Three more books. Like just looking at it from a different angle. I just want to look at it all from different angles because I think it gets clearer and clearer the more angles you look at it from.
Is that like so? The more you kind of write about the subject, you can impart more kind of what's the word for it? More kind of perspectives on it. I mean,
Yeah,
are
that's
you
it. I want different perspectives to make it more, multidimensional.
okay?
But the Food for Conscious book was really to hammer it out in my own, work it out in my own mind, if anything, how to explain it. What has happened to humanity in a nutshell. It's really in a nutshell, and
So,
what we can
as
start to
when you were
do.
writing the book, then your Food for Consciousness book, was that like you said there? That was your way of laying it out for yourself, and then you realised
Yeah,
actually this is
it
a
changed
blueprint
my
I
mind
could
while I
show
was
to somebody
writing it
else.
because to actually have to spell it all out, it was exhausting. It was
I can only
absolutely
imagine.
mental. And because you're putting something into words that you can see and feel, and then to turn it all to words and coherent sentences was a long process. And then you've done it, you think, is that it then?
So how long did that book take you to write then?
I don't know, years in the end. But in the end, when I finally decided I really got to buckle down to it and get this written up, it was a few months.
All right. So what kind
And
of
I could,
feedback did you get from the first people who started to read it from your publishers and
um,
stuff? What kind of people?
I think the main feedback I get from people is that it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's different. It's just different to anything that you're really going to hear from elsewhere. But you know what? For me, it's all about the practical application. You see, because to read it and to think about it and to do it are two different things, and that's part of the brain split. Because what's happened. So we never talked about the brain split, but because the DNA is not being read to its full potential because the chemistry in our bodies has changed from its original chemistry. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that.
And so the impact it's had is like it's had an impact on the neural system, which is the major thing, but also digestive system, hormonal system, and immune system. So but also everything. But it's the change in neural system has caused us to have a split brain. So there was an idea came back in the 60s that our left brain was about logic and language, and the right brain was about creative stuff. But that was the 60s, and in the public view, that's probably where it still is. But there's been so much research done since then, which really points the idea that really the left hemisphere is a very limited. It's become very limited, and there's lots of latent capacity in the right hemisphere that's simply not being used because the left hemisphere is dominant. It's called cerebral dominance.
Okay, nice to have a good look
It's
into that.
established scientific fact. This isn't something I've sort of drawn out of some new age movement or something. This is scientifically accepted that humans live in a condition of cerebral dominance. The left hemisphere is dominant, and more evidence is coming out that it's very limited in its capacities.
Is that because of the way of our education is, or the way that we choose to?
That exacerbates it, but it's there in the first place. Unfortunately, you see, and a lot of the spiritual traditions were designed to work with the condition, and try and sort of ameliorate it. For example, the traditions of like meditation and yoga and various dancing and music and practices.
Well, it's like an embrace of both physical activity and mental activity, because obviously the one thing I'm very conscious of is that we no longer seem to retain as much knowledge as we used to have because we write so much down. So if you look at the ancient texts, of course, based on oral traditions, and those texts, the way that we used to speak and communicate was in vast volumes of information. I can see it. I'm quite liking your picture behind you, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's from Mexico. It's on fig paper. I've forgotten the name of it. It's paper made from fig bark.
Oh right, that's interesting.
Figs are a really special food, so it means quite a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I love birdsong, and I just love birdsong.
Wow. Okay. So.
Anyway, you were saying we're talking about memory, and then you were saying something else, and I got distracted, so I didn't hear what it was.
Okay, so in regards to memory, there are loads of people who appear to be a bit more tapped into that way of study, so they can increase their memory capacity, which is always a better way of storing information.
We think we're so clever because now we've got all this technology, and we thought we were so clever when we could write, and it was clever to do that, but we needed that because we'd lost our memories, so we had to write it all down. Don't think of it like that. We're so clever, we can paint. Oh, we're so clever, we can write. We're so clever, we can read. So why did we need all these things?
I think there's Plato who describes about the more we commit to writing, and we take away from oral memory.
But maybe we do need these things in order to get through this phase.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also the fact that, and the ways that we used to write on stone tablets, or we used to write on the wall, and we started to write on paper. Now we write digitally for a majority of our day-to-day life. I mean, whether it be that everything from our work-related aspects to how we write our diary, for instance, because I guess Facebook is now our new version of a journal. So if the internet goes down, or if we no longer have access to the internet or the cloud, do we have access to our own personal life anymore if we commit so much to that? And then the fear is, of course, if that was to go down for whatever reason, whether it be just electricity goes down or we don't have access to power, do we then lose all of our history because we've committed so much to the digital way of life.
Maybe, you know, I suppose. So I'm really enjoying this conversation actually because it's just got a flow of its own. I was going to say maybe it wouldn't really matter. So what is so special about all this history anyway? It's like it's a bit of a, you know, I mean, I would, for me personally, I'd look at it differently. I just think that, you know, it's been a disaster, and it's like, it sounds like so negative, but it isn't really. It's just been some just sort of bizarre blip where humans have lost their minds. You know, do we really want to all remember a lost weekend? Do we really ultimately?
Well, maybe not.
Do you know what I mean?
I haven't had those weekends for many, many years.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying?
I
It's
do.
like
I get where you're coming from with that.
humanity's gone on a lost weekend, and you know whether we'll be able to remember much of it all when we come out of it. I do wonder. You know, I'm sure we could if we really racked our brains, but why would we want to? I really think humanity has gone a lost weekend, and I do really believe that we are capable of more. And you know, and it's not just a belief; it's something I've seen enough glimpses of to know that there's something more. And I know that there's specific things you can do to move in that direction. So, you know, for the moment, for the individual, you know, there's the actual nourishment and reactivation of the neural system. And this is a big topic, so I'm just touching on it, you know?
Sure.
And there's various, and it's not just to rebuild it and refuel the neural system. It's actually, it's getting the pineal gland. It's dealing with the issue of the pineal gland and what it would ideally be pumping.
I'm so glad you mentioned the pineal gland because that was one of the first things I looked at your website about, say, a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, she mentions the pineal gland. That's something.
It's the most searches I get on anything I've written about the pineal gland because I used to write a lot more years ago about it.
Okay, so obviously I'm aware more these days about the fact that what it produces in the brain. It produces a natural version of DMT, which is basically as our dream drug. I hate to use that word.
Yeah, we need it to see patterns.
Yeah, it's a very very powerful driver of also of symbolism. I see that the symbol, the shape of the pineal gland also is found quite in our natural art that from thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And today I find that really fascinating. They seem to know that that's where the basis of our consciousness and our dream, or when they came to describe it.
I don't know whether it's the basis of our consciousness personally. What I do know is that it's designed to pump some very important chemicals
through the body.
You know, I don't know. Maybe it is the inner eye to some degree. You know, maybe it is the, you know, I don't know whether you can say it's the basis of our consciousness on the grounds that it's an eye. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
That doesn't. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure about that, but it's very important. And yes, it's some kind of inner eye, and it pumps. Well, it's designed to pump some very important chemicals. So there's a melatonin, which we're currently, as humans, we're very deficient in.
We are, yeah.
Yeah, and that gets worse at about the time of puberty. The melatonin levels drop at the time of puberty,
so,
which is part of the teenage crisis.
Well, there's a bit of a panic of identity around that age, isn't there?
Because the chemistry changes. So, excuse me, I just want to draw a curtain.
That's fine, no problem. Can't seem to change this camera.
If you think about it, if you lose melatonin's role, it's got. I mean, there's lots of things it does, like any chemical in the body, but it's important in the reading of the DNA. So, you know, that's part of the reason that one of the mechanisms that human DNA is not read to its full potential is the lack of melatonin, and that exacerbates at the time of puberty.
So, but is that then not a natural process? If you...
Not puberty as we know it, no. And you think about it, aging starts after that melatonin drop.
I suppose it does actually, because that's when your body starts to go through.
You think aging is essential, but children aren't aging. Adolescents aren't aging. It's only after that melatonin drop. Also, what happens? The development of the brain slows. So it's limiting the size of the brain having that drop.
But is that then not perhaps an intentional part of our biology to have that happen?
From where?
I don't know. I guess it would be how we've evolved to this point so far, is that there should be a certain drop.
I don't know. It depends what you mean by evolution. I would say something's actually gone wrong.
Okay.
But that's my view on it.
Yeah,
that's
the same with certain animals.
I don't think it's some survival advantage to have a limited brain.
So I was kind of wondering, I wonder if that's the same with animals. Do they have a puberty stage themselves, and then there's a drop off? Because that would be the way to compare it. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there is something, but it's something quite extreme happens with humans.
oh man,
Something's quite different has happened to humans that's happened.
someone's gone in there with a DNA surgical knife and knocked it off at a certain point in their life.
Humans, I think maybe humans were able to break out of that puberty thing. You know, I mean, it's possible that humans could remain almost like eternal children. You know, maintain that playfulness all through life and that massive capacity for learning. And, you know, the traditions talk about the times, you know, you've got mythology talking about the times when we were children, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
We stayed like children.
My thoughts go
in the nicest possible way.
Of course, I completely understand. But so my thoughts were going to say, like, gymnasts, for instance. I watched a documentary a few years ago in regards to, I think it was the Ukrainian gymnast team, and they would actually give them chemicals to abstain their puberty, so they can maintain a thinner body, so their breasts don't grow. They maintain a slimmer figure and a smaller frame. And I kind of wonder, would that therefore be the same situation where we've intervened to kind of hold off puberty? And would that be to give them, I don't know what chemicals they gave them.
You can delay puberty by supplementing with melatonin. I'm not, by the way, you know, when I say these things, I'm not recommending anything to anybody.
No,
I'm just passing commentary.
We're just exploring the conversation, so.
You know, because anything we do is experimental. And you don't know what's going to happen if you experiment with these. I've done a heck of a lot of experimenting. Some of it, experiments I'm really pleased with. Some of them I'm not, you know, I was thinking, well, actually I need to change that thing. But I think that the alternative is worse. And we're in the middle of this sort of experiment now, you know, on the world that's clearly very dangerous already. So I'm not got too many worries about trying a different experiment.
So talking of different experiments, again, I read on your site about something related but different. And you're talking about neurotransmitters. You talked a lot about ancestral trauma. I saw that as much. So was that one of your experiments, or that was an idea where you looked at?
Well, I sometimes talk about it. But I'm trying to think which bit you're talking about.
So I think the phrase looks at it says there are particular plant species that which can reset our neurotransmitters.
Oh, you're talking about iboga, perhaps.
Okay.
Iboga? Yeah, because something I became because you know, obviously I've been working with these methods for a long while, and it just seemed to me that, you know, I mean, it's so challenging. You know, and you don't give up on life and humanity, and you just keep trying, and it's so challenging. And I was realising a lot of people that they could be having all sorts of amazing foods and herbs, and they could know that negative thinking was pointless, and yet couldn't stop. I mean, I think we all have that to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I'm getting into conversations with people and realising that, you know, there's no doubt that, you know, people get addicted to it. And they're addicted to certain emotions. But even knowing that you're addicted to certain emotions doesn't mean you can kick them.
No, and I think there's certain emotional cycles we like to keep ourselves in.
They're addictive, and it's like and there could be some trauma ancestrally, and it gets passed on in this manner, generation after generation, because the parents have to keep the same kind. They only know how to operate in certain emotional states. You know, these are backed up by peptides. Peptides are the chemicals involved in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm aware. Like
you know about peptides.
I do. I've tried to negate. Sorry, negate's the wrong word. Trying to relate that to my own experiences of how I can see my mother used to tell me about some experiences that her father did to her, and what she had told me about. He had said that his grandfather did to him, and so on. And those experiences have then come on. I'm going, okay, so how would I challenge that? And I guess I've thought for a long time about those things, because I've kind of had a mental kind of a perspective outwards about how to deal with that. So how to challenge and change those behaviours, because I don't wish to recreate them. So in not recreating them, do I then pass on to, say, my son or my daughter not those behaviours because I'm not doing them?
It's very difficult, isn't it? Would you say? Is it fair to say?
It is fair to say, very difficult.
It's not as easy, and in certain patterns of emotion you get into.
Yeah, there are.
it's quite difficult to, but anyway, this is what I found out about, is that as iboga, I mean, iboga's become very, it was originally, it's an African, it was used in various parts of Africa for initiation rites and so forth, and then it was discovered that it could be used to kick drug addictions.
I can see why that would be the case, yeah.
But it also works about emotional addictions too.
I think we all find ourselves in these like kind of loops, effectively. And it could be a childhood experience. How
it just can cut through it. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It just is one of the most powerful things. It just resets. It resets the receptors and the neurotransmitter levels.
That's really interesting. I think I definitely have a look into it.
So I've no doubt that plant medicines of various kinds, and there's probably more for us to discover, are a crucial part of this healing process. I just don't think we can get away from that.
No, I don't think that's definitely the case. Definitely.
We need them, and we need to find out more. And they're our allies. And our connection with plants. You see, we're designed. This is a really so I want to move on to one of my favourite topics. You see, so sort of recap on the pineal, right? So you've got the pineal biochemistry. Broadly speaking, so you've got tons of melatonin, bits of DMT, and monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which are basically chemicals which keep the neurotransmitter levels up, yeah?
Yes.
And pumped out by the pineal gland. So you've got all that chemistry that's meant to be going on that isn't going on to the same degree as it used to. Then we've got our own hormones as humans, and the sex hormones. So we've got all that going on. And then there's another load of powerful chemistry we're designed to have going on, and that's the plant chemistry. And that's just even in fruits, and just these sort of regular raw foods and fruits. There's immensely powerful chemistry. The only reason that we don't necessarily notice it when we eat a pile of fruit, I mean, I notice it, but I didn't used to, is we're just so numbed off with everything else that we've become oblivious to it.
Also, is it like a sensitivity that you'll become more aware of, and then when you have something that perhaps is not that case, you go, wait a minute, that feels very different.
Yes, Dad.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, like, it's quite interesting occasionally, I went off some, extracurricular eating at the weekend, and then I just, in the morning, I just ate a mango, and I was like, oh, I'm back again. I've got that connection again. I'm back. Just to eat one mango, and I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. But there is powerful chemistry in fruit and vegetation. So as humans, we're designed to be running in a mixture of our own hormones, plant chemistry, and the pineal chemistry, yeah? And if you change that, we're going to feel a lot different.
Yeah, well, would do, and that we can change our diet in that regards as well. So
it just feels a lot different. But then you start, even basic fruits have powerful chemistry that affect the way we feel and the way we experience life and our sense of ourselves. What the expense of what it is to be. So, but when you start bringing in more powerful herbs in to modulate things, it's another level. And that's what I'm interested in, is the layering. You've got the basic foods that nourish you, that activate your neural system, that fuel your neural system, all this stuff. You've got all that going on. Then you start modulating it judiciously and carefully with various herbs. And then, you start doing various other practices to modulate the left hemisphere and right hemisphere, bearing in mind what's happening. And you can quite quickly move into a really quite different state.
Yeah, because I guess what you have food-wise, what you have drink-wise, what you're intaking, the energy that then your body is then processing is a very different diet to say what you'd have typically on a, I had to use the word regular basis. But if that is then, so obviously your body's fuel is obviously what you put in it. So when you change that, I bet you'd feel the differences.
And you can't. It's not something. It's something you can talk about, but experiencing it is something else. It's beyond words.
Yeah.
And it's by and that's not just a cliche, because the right hemisphere is beyond words.
Because I guess that's where the creative aspect of our personality and is supposed to be.
It's literally beyond words. So you can talk about it, and you can make a convincing argument to try and say, give it a go. But what you experience is beyond words. It's not something. So that's why I prefer to talk about practical things that we can do, because what you experience is beyond words. And trying to put words on it, there's other people who put words to these expanded experiences better than I can, and their work is valuable. But unless you experience it, what's the point?
That is from people who talk about like ayahuasca and DMT. That is that is often their the way they explain it. Is that, look, I can tell you about it, but strictly speaking, I do not have the words for what this experience is.
And you would lose some of it, because the whole point is to live continuously, not unlike on an ayahuasca trip, but to live continuously in connection with whatever you might call it, that expanded sense of consciousness, to something, to divine intelligence, the mind of nature, source, whatever you choose, words that, we would choose in this limited way of discussing it. But, it's not to just have some big experience and some big revelation and live your life by that, by set of rules. Just to live continuously in that sense of electrical connection to this thing that's bigger than you and bigger than your life. And that's how you have your immortality. It's not that you're going to live forever, it's that you're connected to something that is bigger than you, that goes on forever. And that's how you find your eternal soul. And what more could you want?
There is something very interesting. You talk about use the word immortality there, and there is something quite noticeable about people who generally have a healthier, sorry, should we say, a fruit or a nut or even a vegan diet. There's something very different about their skin, the way that they have a certain radiance about them. I'm not sort of speaking.
It's really noticeable, isn't it?
It is very noticeable, and the way that they talk to people, it also appears to be very different too. And I can't. So what you're talking about there is very identifiable in other people. And obviously in ourselves, I guess we start changing our behaviour based on what comes in, as it were. So so I was going to say, but there appears to be, certainly in the last probably 5-10 years, certainly more so now, a bigger identification of things like gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance. I guess what comes into that, for some people, they would say that that's a fad. Some people would say that that's our body changing evolutionary, in a very negative way, based on the other chemicals that are coming into our body. So it might be what your parents are eating. When you have a child, that child then has gluten intolerance or lactose intolerance, and you have those who it appears to happen over a course of time. So I might not have that experience now, so my body is not rejecting it now, but if I continue to drink milk 10 years down the line, my body has had so much, it then becomes lactose intolerant. So
there's several things going on. I mean, one thing is that, is like the quality of food is getting worse. So, if, for example, although people have probably been wheat intolerant for a long while, when it's sprayed with, the kind of chemicals it's sprayed with now, there's going to be more of a reaction.
Yes, I guess.
But probably, I think people have had, people have not been getting on too well with these things for generations and generations. I mean, effects might accumulate over the generations, also because the quality of food is so much worse, got so much other chemistry. But, I'll just tell you an interesting little fact, like gluten, all the gluten-free stuff isn't gluten-free. Gluten, by definition, is the protein in grains.
It is, yeah.
And if you're eating grains, you're eating gluten.
Yeah.
But there's many different types of gluten.
So
the gluten-free range in the supermarket is just free of certain types of gluten. I've forgotten even the names.
In my head, I think there's like 4 major ones, isn't there?
There's lots. There's more, because by gluten, by definition, is the protein in grains.
That's right.
So grains are not human food. I'm not moral about this, and I understand that there are loads of considerations. So it's not a moral judgment to me. I'm not one of these health police types. I'm just saying it's a fact that grains aren't really human food.
No.
Doesn't mean you mustn't eat it, or Holly's going to think badly of you if you do. I mean, I'm well known for being very, too liberal about everything, really, because I understand. It's just we've got a lot of things to juggle. It's not easy to find a way through. But I'm just saying, still, that grains are not human food.
No, and I think there's quite a few interest in something I discovered recently. Of course, is alkaline fruits. And alkaline-based food. Now, I don't know too much about that, so I'm going to go find the right people who will be able to tell me about that. So it was described to me that avocados, along with that they are alkaline-based vegetables and fruits, and they have an interesting reaction on the body. Much in the same way you're describing how people their stress levels would come down, their behaviour appears to not be as volatile by having alkaline-based foods, and a lot of healthy individuals, shall we say, appear to be having a large diet of many fruits and nuts. But the one thing they all swear by is avocado. So I'm thinking, well, there's got to be something to this. But as it stands, I can't stand the taste of it.
Yeah, well, don't worry about that. There's so many different things you need. I mean, you don't need to be eating avocados.
Well,
it's not important. You know, you do need to be eating certain types of fat. So my drink's coming through. Are you okay?
It's okay.
Thanks, Jazz. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So what kind of drink you got? Tea?
Thank you. Oh, no, you don't. I'll tell you in a moment. Yeah, thank you. I'll put it on the floor. Thanks.
And what do you have? You
thank
tell me
you.
now.
I'll tell you in a moment. Yeah, it's a Brahmi hot chocolate.
Oh.
So so you know, I do eat some cooked things, but it's a hot chocolate drink with Brahmi in it.
Oh, okay.
And Brahmi is a herb that we've got a bit of a craze on it in our family right now. It's
because I've never heard of that. So
rebuilds the neural system.
So where does that come from? So I don't know. It's not a word I've ever come across. So
oh God, I can't remember where it comes from.
I'm sure I can Google it.
You can Google it. I can't remember. That's it's a how you see herb that expands the brain. I can't remember where it comes from now. I can't remember off the top of my head. So many. I mean, you make me want to Google it now and check. I can tell you. I'm going to tell you.
How do you even spell it? Is it Brahmi?
Brahmi.
Okay, Brahmi. Okay, so what is... Okay, I can see there's a list here what says the 11 impressive benefits of Brahmi, organic facts.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
And it helps you sleep as well.
Okay.
It rebuilds the brain, but it also helps you sleep.
Okay, so
there's loads of benefits.
So Google says, what is the use of Brahmi? It's a traditional and therapeutic herb native to India.
Bacopa monieri.
That's the one, yeah. Commonly used in Ayurvedic medicine as a memory enhancer, aphrodisiac, and general tonic.
Yeah, I can't remember where it grows now.
It says in India, so its impact on cognitive performance.
I just don't want to say unless I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you get Brahmi oil as well.
Yeah, of course, it's Ayurvedic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I might have to have a look into that.
I'm not. In a way, I'm a much more practical person than can't always recite tons of facts. I try to just. It's the storyline that matters. It's the general context. It's getting the context.
Well.
That's what's lacking. It's the context.
So do you get like Brahmi powder? Do you get like a liquid? Is it
powder? It's a powder. We use a lot of different herbs, and still not even. There's so many things, and there's more to be discovered continually. There's a magic about this. It's like you think you know loads, and then there's just more that you never even considered. You think how many plant species there are.
Oh,
I don't think we even know them all.
No, we really don't. I think we can classify them.
I know we don't know them all.
And we keep finding them. Keep finding more.
And how do we know they're not being created? How do we know that they're not coming into existence? We don't know any of this. It sounds really wacky when you talk like this, but how do we know that new ones aren't coming to existence?
Absolutely. It's like new species.
We don't know that, do we? Why would we make a lot of presumptions about this kind of stuff?
We do.
So, yeah, there's so many different herbs you can use.
So, just talking on Brahmi, because I'm interested. So, where I can see lots of different shops and stuff that have it online for sale. Yeah. So, what would you add it to? Would you add it to things that you cook with? Is it just things you'd add to your hot chocolate in your case? Is it just for drinks?
Habit of doing that. It's become a habit making hot chocolate.
You can have habits.
You can make a raw hot chocolate as well.
Okay, you like cocoa powder or something?
Yeah, you can with coconut butter and some kind of tea of choice, and then just adding. You can add raw chocolate powder to it, and some sort of sweetener. It could be like honey or maple syrup or lucuma or stevia, just whatever your choice is, and then you can blend in herbs to it and make a herbal raw hot chocolate.
Oh man, that sounds good. That does sound really good.
So I've got recipes on this kind of thing. They're in my book, but there's so many ways you can vary it. I mean, I need to get around to making some YouTube videos with all this kind of thing.
But when you start
to think of your food and drink in this manner, it's not very appealing to go back to the old ways.
I bet not. But is there then? It becomes a bit of a dependency on going to Holland and Barrett. Is that where it goes, and everything becomes so expensive because it appears that health-orientated foods come with a bit of a higher price tag.
Yeah, but well, personally, I don't ever go to Holland and Barrett. It's not really necessary. And because we sell stuff, we have a lot of stock of our own stock.
I suppose, yeah.
So not just, but we don't sell everything. I tend to buy online, to be honest. because I don't like going shopping, but and I don't
to your house.
buy from Holland and Barrett because they haven't got the best range of things. But yeah, I mean, so getting back to the point you're making about the price, yeah, it's more expensive.
Well, that's an interesting thing, is it? With things
But
technically
how
being
would
made
you,
in a
how would you
simpler
spend your
form.
money if you don't prioritize your own experience of life? What are you spending money on? Because it's the most central thing to your experience of life is your own brain chemistry.
Your day-to-day life, of course, yeah.
So you can have a better time going for a walk that costs nothing if your brain's nourished so that you can experience that in its full entirety, than spending a fortune going on a holiday or going to a concert or whatever,
Yeah, I certainly agree. I live not far from a nature reserve, so I head up there quite often.
It's so central to your experience of life. It's pivotal to your experience of life.
Absolutely.
So that's why I prioritise it above everything else. And that's, and I does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Well, and also I'd say that, it's like, looking at it from the negative point of view, losing health is it's very difficult to regain it. I mean, it can be done. I'm not saying it's not. People do this all the time. People have massive recoveries, but it's hard work.
Yeah, it certainly appears to be the case.
It's easier to sustain it because. So do you mind if I just close the curtain?
Sure, absolutely fine.
Just makes it feel more private. You there?
Absolutely fine, right here.
See, how good life is depends on how we feel, and this is the most direct way of affecting how you feel.
So I guess how you feel also depends. It then becomes it spreads out, it shares out, because that's how you deal with people. That's how you communicate to your family,
and it starts to build your whole life, and you have more energy. Another thing to consider is that it varies from person to person, but it's not uncommon when you move to this way of eating to need 2 hours sleep less a night. So you've got a couple more hours in your day. You're more productive. You're more efficient. You're more capable. So you start to get a lot of you have your potential then.
I'm intrigued at that point. So I found that so about a year ago, I utterly dropped dairy from my diet, apart from chocolate and Easter this year, and I found that I was a lot more energetic. I found that I was a lot more. I didn't need as much sleep. I would wake up fully refreshed, having only had 5 to 6 hours sleep.
Yeah.
And I found that I for a long time now, 10 years plus, I haven't had anything that's aspartame based or chemical based.
No.
I've deliberately and intentionally kept them out of my diet.
And
I feel so much better because of it.
Yeah.
And I see now that, say, obviously where I work, I can see there's now more artificial sweeteners and products that are now entering our general food supply. And I guess for a lot of people, that's now going to affect them in an even more negative way. And I would encourage people, and I'm sure you're the same, is that to stay away from those kind of foods anyway. And I can see having better sleep, more productive sleep, you then feel better throughout the day. You can have a much more proactive day, just because
that's it.
And then you can, at the end of it, it's like, whew, good, and you can go to sleep just fine, wake up, and you're ready to go straight away. And I certainly feel that way every day.
Yeah.
I generally don't wake up grumpy. Of course, I'm sure Sylvia might say otherwise.
No, I don't. The only time I can wake up grumpy is on the odd occasion where I'd eat something that, for me it'd be grains. Because I generally don't, but I still do on the odd occasion. I have a moment of madness, and it's a reminder of just how just a reminder of how much difference it makes. This isn't. I'm not imagining this, because I think there is a little bit of a cycle you get into. You start to feel so amazing that you just think you're invincible. The ego gets hold of that, and you start thinking you're invincible, and you can do anything, and you're still going to feel as good. And then you discover you can't.
So how have you felt that way yourself? Have you had
often,
moments like that?
I just when I keep sort of living by my own recommendations, you start to feel so amazing that you just think you can do anything, and then start to do things that would be against what I'd recommend, and then I remember
I suppose
why
that really that's stretching yourself a bit, isn't it? So you're feeling great.
There's a certain way of living that works for humans, and there's other ways of living that just don't.
But I guess, like you were saying earlier, you do a lot of experimentation, a lot of experiments. So I
Mm.
guess if you have a certain wave length of body, so you're in a certain mindset, you're feeling
Yeah,
invincible, you're then not afraid to go. Let me try this,
yeah,
and then I know then if it works or not.
yeah.
Is
And then I'm not kidding myself about this. This stuff is true. But on the expense front, I would say, there are ways of doing this, that in terms of the food, that you can get the cost down. You don't have to do it. There are ways of keeping the costs. It's still going to be more expensive than, say, eating cereal for breakfast and baked beans on toast for lunch. It's going to be cost more than that.
of course, oh yeah. So
But it doesn't have to be super expensive, and you find ways around it. For example, in the morning I make this chocolate pudding every morning, and it's made with hemp milk from hemp seeds, and it's got
yeah, I use
sunflower
hemp milk myself.
seeds,
Yeah,
pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, and dried figs, bananas. And I throw some superfoods in there, coconut butter, and I throw some superfoods in there. But the basic ingredients aren't that expensive. Sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, but they're not that expensive really, and you don't need that much of it because it's very nourishing. So yeah, it's cheaper than a bowl. It's more expensive than a bowl of cereal, but
well,
you don't have to be eating super expensive gourmet style, health food bought snacks.
I've
Foods.
seen certainly just online. There's been a wave of um, how do you describe it? It's like meals that can come to your house, or you
Yeah.
literally can buy a meal of the day. So you'd buy a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then
Well,
you
is
would
this
buy.
raw food you're talking about, or
Yeah,
just
I think
general?
that's no. It's kind of like websites that kind of provide you a diet for the week.
Yeah,
You buy a certain set
yeah.
menu for a week, and everything comes in like these microwavable packets, and you can just
Oh right.
throw them in,
Oh yeah.
and then you eat like that. Um, and they might include like quite very healthy options. And I guess for
Well, if they're
today's,
microwaved, they're not.
well,
They're
no,
not healthy
no,
options.
but
Because that's destroying the vitamin and mineral well, not the mineral content, it's destroying the vitamin content in one blow.
yeah, it's horrible stuff. I literally, since the microwave died in our house about 3-4 years ago, I haven't ever had a need to replace it. Everything's cooked from fresh.
I've
So.
never had one in my life. I've never used one in my life, except I think it might be an occasion once where someone was at a house where I was told to heat up a cup of coffee. I was very
Oh,
bamboozled. No, so the thing is, when you eat this way, it's very quick. I spend remarkably little time shopping or preparing food.
I
There's
suppose that
just
would
ways
be.
of doing it.
Yeah,
It's just so simple. And what happens is, it, when I first got into raw food, I started making all sorts of elaborate food because I missed cooked food. Yeah, I
okay,
missed certain dishes that I was used to eating. Yeah,
okay.
but people told me you'll change, and I didn't really want to change, but I did change. And to me, there's more pleasure opening up a mango and eating it with a spoon out the skin than there would be to eat some fancy gourmet dessert.
Yeah,
There's actually literally more pleasure.
I bet there is. Yeah, I mean, the
But
one.
it's not. But it's not enforced. I wouldn't say to someone you should be like that, because it's not something that I made myself be like. It just happened naturally. It couldn't be helped.
So what do you think about like pre-prepared fruits? Like you go to the supermarket, you find like a plastic package, and where then there's about 8 fruits in there, like already pre-peeled, or you
Yeah,
get
well,
like
it's
a
it's
clementine in
obviously
a
it's
packet.
losing food value, isn't it?
It is, yeah,
But it's as on the run. I've done it.
yeah,
It's like I've been driving, stopped at a petrol station. I'm grateful that you can buy a tub of chopped up fruit, and I'm
yeah.
grateful that you have those options now that you wouldn't have had 10 years ago. So I think, to me, it's like, what's the best you can do? So we've generally got a certain number of options available, and if you can do one that's better than another option you might have done, that's great.
Yeah.
It's not about perfectionism. Perfectionism is a terrible thing, and that's a whole topic. I mean, we could have a whole talk on that, but this is not about perfectionism. This is about moving in the right direction. That's all we need to do, is move in the right direction. It comes back to purpose and goals. If you're looking in the direction that's beautiful and appealing, you're on it. You're fine. You're great. You don't have to be there right now. You don't.
So
It's just
as long as
moving
you're
in the right direction.
making
It's so
efforts to get there.
liberating. I think the fewer hard and fast rules we have, the better. I don't go with hard and fast rules anymore. it's just making better choices and heading in the direction that is appealing to you. And that's, I'm surprised actually you talk to people about what direction they really feel they're heading in. Surprising how many people don't know, haven't even thought about it.
It's true. I mean, I guess I've been there myself, and I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring or a year down the line.
No, we don't know things like that, but to have a general sense of where you're aimed. It's about aimed. It's not about knowing where you're going to be. It's about where you're aiming for.
Absolutely.
Having a sense of aim. That's different to mapping out in a dogmatic way what your goals are and what you've got to do to achieve them. Although you might have a bit of that in there. It's about the essence of aim, where you're pointing at.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. I feel that too.
Yeah. You don't know what's, because you can set off with an aim, and then just the very fact you've decided to have that aim, that starts to change things immediately. So then other things happen, and because there's obviously much larger forces in ourselves at work. So, that all starts to get stirred up. So you do one little thing, and then a whole heap of other stuff
comes along
that you wouldn't have ever seen coming. But it's the primary thing is about where are we actually heading?
I was going to say, so from talking about where we're heading and what we're doing. So, again, from your website, I saw you have a bit of a long-term plan for a research centre. Is that right?
That's the dream. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think everybody's so crazy and everything's so complicated that just to be able to go back to land and just live simply would just do me. But ideally, I mean, that would be something to aim for. Is what it boils down to is really. There's a chance for humanity. There's a chance, and I want to go back. We're talking about I was talking to you about the chemistry in humans. This mix of hormones and pineal hormones and plant chemistry. But it's theoretically possible. Now, this is all based on the work of someone called Tony Wright, who's written a book called Return to the Brain of Eden. But it's not even really his work. It's this data that supports what he saw. He saw the picture. And he put together the data that's already in existence.
Right. Okay.
And and it's pointed this, and a lot of what I talk about is the huge amount is based on what his findings. But I was looking for him, because I knew there was something I needed to know, and I was looking for the information, and I found him, and I found his website, and I found his work. So it wasn't. You see what I mean? I was already looking. You have to ask the question before you can get the answer.
Sure, yeah, because you need to know what to put in your search.
And the question is, what is wrong with people? Why aren't we happy? These are the questions. And then, and then I went on my trail and found raw food, and I found Tony's work. And, so I would just point, there's a book called Return to the Brain of Eden, which documents a lot of what I'm talking about. But,
so is that the book that kind of like changed your life in that respect?
It's the diagnosis and it's diagnosis of the condition and practical ideas of what we can do. And then I started trying them out, and they worked. And then I thought, this is real science. This is real research. Research isn't going on Google. Real scientific research is actually you try something out and see what happens. And then the next thing is you start to make predictions about if you do something, what is likely to happen. And when you can make predictions about what will happen and it happens, then you're onto some sort of real science, yeah? So, and this is real scientific experimentation,
Well, the scientific experimentation is the scientific method, isn't it? It's the case of, to hypothesize, to observe, to experiment, and then draw your conclusion. But this is doing it
in the bigger field, the big laboratory of life, rather than in the little laboratory indoors. So the big laboratory of life, which is, of course, very complicated, but you can still do these experiments. And I found that, what he said bore out. So I started doing all these things, and I started to have certain experiences. And that's when I realised how big the consciousness of the Earth was. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Wow.
When you realise that the Earth has got a consciousness and you can communicate with it, but that came from that experience. And then you realise that you're connected to something, an intelligence that's way bigger than you and can help you. And then the life became very different. And I'm always kind of reluctant to talk about this kind of stuff because it'll start pushing the boundaries, and then people might think, oh, that's something I can't understand. And
I can understand why you would say that. I can completely understand why you would say that, because it then becomes a different conversation. I hate to use the phrase straw man. It's then like another thing you put in the way that then... Sorry. it's like another thing then people have to talk about. And I like the way that you've done it. So
Yeah.
this is the
But you
important
see, but
side of
it
it. This is
is
the practical
crucial
side.
because what eating natural foods provided by the earth connects you to the earth, and it's you know, you can see it's like a mathematical patterning. It's because living things have a fractal structure. It's based on the golden ratio phi, you know, the Fibonacci series. This is the pattern that you get in living things, and that pattern facilitates communication and growth. It's just a function of it. So when you're filling yourself with things that are in that pattern, you feel more communication, you feel more connection to the mind of nature.
Do you
And so the
find
mind of
then?
nature is beyond words, so it's a difficult thing to talk about.
Do you find that because let's say you described that your family, of course, has these things as well? Is everyone in, say, your immediate family, your household, also that way inclined as well? Do you find that you
Yeah,
have?
but not, you know, I mean, to some degree, yeah. I mean, not to some degree.
So really, where I was going to go with that question is, what did if they followed the same kind of health way that you do you find you have a much easier form of communication with those as well, with people who have
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
diet or lifestyle or those things,
yeah,
those intakes?
yeah,
There's a much more back and forth,
yeah.
free, loving conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, we're living in civilization and we're living in houses and you know, we have the regular stresses and strains that, you know, everybody has, but
Of
I
course,
still think it helps. It
absolutely.
definitely helps. I've no doubt in my mind it
Do
helps.
you find then it's easier to spot people, should we say? So if you're walking on the high street or walking down the street, that you can kind of see people who also have that kind of that are on that wavelength with you. Is that a much easier thing to see or feel? Because you talk
Yeah, you
about
do
feeling.
feel it when you meet people who like that. Yeah, you do feel it. Yeah, and that's, you know, I mean, over the years, that's the thing. You know, I mean, not so much now, but for many years, I used to talk to people a lot about their experiences and not to tell them what, just to hear from them what they did and what they tried and how they felt and what they experienced. And that's how I got to know so much about it,
Right.
is hearing what other people told me about their experiences. Yeah,
Then
that's,
you went on to
mm,
discover more of your own. That's really interesting. Because I found, I guess I've lived a bit of a anthropological lifestyle. So if I want
mm,
to learn something, I feel I've naturally just slipped into that way of life quite easily.
yeah,
Learned from it. Sometimes taken a step back and then tried something else. And I found that as I progressed at a spiritual side, I
mm,
found a lot of people who were also in that frame of mind too. They were willing to experiment and try, and they'll like things, and they'll um, so it's their spiritual path that might take them to a kind of practical faith. Some people have a very spiritual faith, but they'll find that they're doing it in such a way that they want to communicate with other people, and that appears to be what they were trying to discover. They're trying to
yeah,
discover who they are, and they're trying lots of different ways to find
mm,
out who they are and what other people are and their relationship and their bond with them is. I think that's a really interesting way that we communicate
mm,
with each other. You find people who are on the same journey, the path as you are, but then
mm,
occasionally you would come past and then you would split off from each other again because you're willing to
yeah,
try and meet other people. Or you go, okay, I've learned what I can from this individual, and my journey with that person is then done. I can go and journey on over here as well. I can
yeah.
take those experiences of learning with me. So I wonder if that was
I
the.
think, you know, I've got to the stage now where I feel like you know, that I've got various things that I need to that still keep me in, I don't know, keep me in a certain lifestyle. But, you know, that's not forever. And, you know, I'm really looking to, I don't know exactly what form it's going to take.
Isn't that great
But
then?
no, but I do know that I need to be in nature. And I mean properly in nature. I don't mean in the so-called countryside. And, you know, and forest gardening, and it's not something you actually can do in Britain or in many countries in Europe because of legislation, because the crucial plants that we need are illegal.
I mean, we can only wonder why they've been made illegal.
The most important plants are illegal, and it's too tiresome. And the climate's too difficult to grow the things that I want to grow. I don't know
Could
exactly
you
what form.
share a few examples? What might be in your mind?
Always, so I get more and more reluctant to be drawn on anything as time goes on.
No, it's okay. That's okay if you want to.
But I know, I'll give an example, right?
Okay.
give an example. And yeah, I think why I draw back, because people think they know everything about all these things already, and then I sort of hesitant to mention them because I've probably got a slightly different take. But for example, the DMT issue. So
Sure.
it's a good idea to have tiny amounts of DMT, and one of the most effective ways of doing it is using ayahuasca herbs. So, I'm not necessarily very impressed with all the, what it's like. Ayahuasca comes to the modern world, and people are just doing it every Sunday, and it's like church on Sunday, and I just kind of wonder if it's actually helping people.
I guess the experience of, again, I've not had it personally, but I do read a lot of people who've had that experience. And it's also the journey to head over to Central America, that kind of thing. That's also
Yeah.
that's part of the journey of it, doing it as well, and obviously.
Yeah, but even so, I think what matters is the intention of it. So what is the purpose of doing it, But what I do, but putting that aside and my reservations on that front, probably got this hot chocolate all in my face now.
They look lovely, don't worry. It's fine.
It doesn't matter anyway, does it? It's tiny. For example, one thing that can be done is using tiny amounts of ayahuasca herbs, is to get a little bit of DMT into the brain. And you can't grow ayahuasca herbs in Britain. You can't even import ayahuasca herbs into Britain. It's illegal.
Wow.
So, it's that kind of thing. You wouldn't want to in Britain, but the point about any kind of project, this is the point. You could have, there's so many projects could be done. Maybe people will do them. Maybe I will. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but these are the kind of projects that can be done. You can do a research project, putting all this kind of stuff into operation. And I'm not just talking about the food and herbs, but for example, reducing the activity of the left hemisphere so that the right hemispheric function can come into play. I'm not saying, obviously, long term, humans could have their holistic brains back and they could have a fully functional left hemisphere. But for humans who are already born, they're dealing with the fact that they've got a damaged left hemisphere. So we're talking about reducing the impact of the left hemisphere. But you see, and you could have projects doing all these kinds of things and sort of measuring people's abilities and documenting that. But there's another project that's way more important than that. I'm really speaking from my heart now, right?
Sure,
but there's another project that's way more important than that. And it's that potentially, if you've got a woman who conceives and carries a child, if she could have the ideal biochemistry while that's happening, she could have a child with a holistic brain again and the pineal gland working properly.
I can see that.
And potentially that's possible. I don't know if it's possible in one generation or it needs to be spread over 7 generations. I don't know how for sure, because this is a work in progress. But this kind of thing is at least in theory possible.
I guess one way to observe that, of course, is to observe the cultures that use ayahuasca on a regular basis.
But they're still, the thing is, people often idealise all these Amazonian societies and tribes in the jungle. And to be honest, it's not, and that's no insult to anyone, but honestly, they may in ways have their lives and personalities that are, that have got some, preferable in some ways to ours, but they've still got the same syndrome.
Yeah.
And people, like to idealize these cultures and romanticize it, but they have all sort of stuff going on that's remarkably similar to the kind of stuff we've got going on.
Of course, yeah, the way they interact with each other, the challenges of the modern world.
Fights and envy and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, of course.
And we came from the forest once, and we still managed to get us. So there had to be a problem in the first place, or it couldn't have gone so wrong. And we've got heaps to learn from these, from tribes who are still living in the forest. We've got heaps to learn from them. They've probably got stuff to learn from us too, because we're further along this crazy route. And they might think that things are a good idea that we already know are a terrible idea.
Yeah,
because we've tried them, and
we've evolved from them and don't do those practices any longer.
So what I was going to say is that it's potentially possible if you got the environment in a woman a certain way, in theory it's possible to produce a very different type of human who doesn't have any of the kind of problems, who wouldn't have to meditate and do yoga, and would eat appropriate diet for sure, but could have an intact whole brain, a pineal gland and hormonal system that works, and had a very different sense of self. You could have children born with a very different sense of self.
Absolutely, I can see why that would be appealing. I guess as we, I use the word evolve, but as we change, that perhaps is it the ideal way to move forward. But I would struggle to work out how we would do that right now.
What else could we do? I don't know. The only thing that makes sense.
It does make sense, and
it's the only thing that really long term makes sense. The rest is just survival.
It is, yeah. It's just survival and day to day, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah.
So we need to be doing something which is a bit more long term, and I guess that
is the only thing that makes sense for the future. As a different type of human, because it's just all survival strategies, and it's all elaborate survival strategies otherwise. So that's what that's what
food for consciousness is all about.
Well, no, food for consciousness is about anything that gets us, that takes into account this condition we've got and what we are designed to be, and moves things from one state to the more direction of where we want to be. But yeah, food for consciousness is literally food for consciousness. It's like the nourishment to get this state of mind back that we'd really like to be in. Was it? I mean, I actually used to have an expression for it. We move into a very different, and profoundly preferable state of consciousness to the one that we have, the one that we have thought is normal. I've forgotten it. I had an expression, but I think it's probably on the website still.
If I can find it, I'll be sure to.
Yeah, it's a very different and profoundly preferable state of consciousness, and that it's how do you qualify it? You can only say we prefer it. Who's to say whether it's better or not? It's something we prefer. Yeah, to get into a state we would prefer to be in.
That is a very good way to think about it. I guess that when we look to the future, that is perhaps where we need to be.
And then having new humans come into the world that we would prefer to be in the world.
I like your thinking. That's certainly the way to go when we look at our future. So, Holly, do you want to round up with some details about yourself on our video? Actually, your web details have been shown.
I'm probably
the entire
looking at the
time.
ceiling most of the time while I'm talking, but that's just what I tend to do. I tend to sort of look.
Thinking up towards where
it's probably how you get. You start to remember what you want to talk about, isn't it? You're just looking up, and I can't really help that. So it probably looks a bit odd in an interview, but
no, it looks absolutely fine, sweetheart.
It's just what can you do? So what is there to say? I've got a website.
Where to find your details? Anything you want to shout out about? Anything you want to talk about? And we'll wrap up.
Well, at the moment, I've just got foodforconsciousness.co.uk, and you can get various foods and herbs. I highly recommend the Geo Cleanse products, really. And there's various, but also my book, Food for Consciousness, is there. You can also buy it it's on Amazon too. And I've got more books on the way, and I've got my own website, hollyjrpage.com. There's bits I'm adding to it bit by bit.
Okay, that's not a bad thing, because you put to it when you feel it's important to do so.
Well, and when I get time, actually.
It's when you get time.
Right, it's overwhelming amounts of stuff, but it's literally when I get a moment to do it.
Okay, so it's hollyjrpage.com and foodforconsciousness.co.uk. Holly, I appear to have lost your audio again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. So the Food for Consciousness book gives the outline of it all, but I'm going to write more smaller books to come at it from different perspectives.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. So
but that's what. And in the book there's over 100 recipes.
Oh, awesome. Because there's certainly some things that you've given me food for thought for to try. So
they're all nice, they're all delicious, and they're all easy. Everything I do is easy, simple. It's none of this complicated, expensive ingredients and that kind of stuff. This is all the kind of stuff that, really you can probably, you can afford on a regular budget. It's all. I mean, I've done this on a regular budget. I've never had vast funds or anything to do it from.
That sounds wonderful. I think everyone would Because that I guess would be is the most important thing. Is that what can you do on a budget? What can you do? You know
You can
what?
do all of it. You do what you can do. That's what you do, because we're all in a pickle anyway. So you do what you can do, and then you build on that, and then you do something more. And that's all any of us can do, because the world's gone mad. So that's all you can
Because
do.
the world's gone mad, you know.
It has. I mean, it has. It's not a secret anymore, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. I think there's
Yeah. So all you can do is just do a bit where you are, and and that's really all you can do. And but there's nothing. What else are you going to do? It's like that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, but I do believe this is our best chance for experiencing that feeling that I think most of us want to feel.
Yeah. Okay then, Holly. I think we all want to feel that way. I think ideally we should bring to a close right here. Right.
I think so.
I think we've had a wonderful conversation, almost 2 hours, and I think we could have
the
many,
time
many more
really
hours.
went, didn't it?
It really has. It's been lovely to talk to you. So
Yeah,
for this
you too.
recording,
Thank you. Yeah, let's end it now. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much.
Not a problem. I think we've had a wonderful kind of exploratory conversation where all the different places we can go. And I would love to have you on in the future again, and perhaps we can talk about your future books. Absolutely.
Please do, yeah. It's really encouraging. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. So we'll end that there. So Holly, absolutely lovely to talk to you. It really has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. It's really refreshing. It's so nice to just talk about all this stuff.
I just think half the problem is talking honestly. I think a lot of people they fit to a format, 15 minutes, here we go, and rather than going, you know what, let's talk about it properly. Let's find out what ticks. Let's find out how it works. Let's find out why. And go with that, and just have a free-flowing conversation. I think that's missing, and that's why I wanted to talk about. That's how I wanted to do these.
Well, you're very good at it, so good luck with all this.
No, but you also.
I'm sure you do really well, because if you sort of approach everybody like this, it's gonna just be brilliant.
I think it's the best way, and it's the way that I'm
also
just
a
learning.
waste of time otherwise, isn't it?
It is. I think that people could take from it and listen to it on their way to work. People can listen to it at home in the background, and that's something I do. I listen to podcasts literally in the background while I'm doing something.
Me too.
So I find that's much more engaging of a conversation when there's actually a genuine conversation happening.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, I get that. I like that.